Welcome back to the Jackson Neill Music Podcast here on Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. Got an awesome episode here for you guys today. I'm talking with Chris Richards of the Washington Post about Maren Morris's latest album. Really cool conversation I had with him. And remember, you can listen to this podcast, subscribe on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, your favorite platform. Also, though, the hub for all of my podcasts, including this one, jacksonneillpodcast.com. Check out that link in the description to visit the website. Today, talking with Chris about Maren Morris's latest project, Girl. He wrote about it in one of his latest pieces over there, as he's one of the pop music critics for the Washington Post. Just wanted to get his initial reactions to the project. I thought he had some really cool viewpoints about the album and, what the takeaways were from it, how amazing her voice was, maybe some things about the lyrics. Really, really cool conversation I had with Chris. A big thank you for him for coming on. And here is my conversation with Chris Richards. Talking about Maren Morris's latest project, what was just your initial reaction to listening to it?
Well, I think she has a phenomenal voice, and I put this first and foremost in the review I wrote of this album, Girl, and that's based on not only this album, but her previous album, live performances I've seen of her, both on television, on the internet, and in three dimensions in real life. I think she is an astounding singer with an incredible amount of range, an incredible amount of power, a certain level of effortlessness. When she goes for the big notes, she doesn't sound like she's straining at all. It feels like it's just kind of flowing out of her like water. So I think she has a phenomenal, phenomenal voice. Listening to the album, I was like, why is this not working for me the same way her previous album, Hero, did, which I thought was almost a flawless record from top to finish. And the conclusion that I kind of came to, I think it's in the lyrics. A lot of the words seemed kind of, beneath the level of singing. And it's rare for me that a lyric can kind of stand in the way of a great vocal performance. I'm usually so attentive to like timbre and tone and feel that I'm willing to forgive just about any words that come out of anyone's mouth when they're vocalizing excellently. But these words really seem to kind of stand in her way on this record in a way that it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So, all in all, I think as ever, she's still, in my estimation, probably the greatest vocalist working in country music right now. But this album seems like a misstep. Although I'm not really discouraged because I feel like her entire career is ahead of her. She has so much time.
Exactly. I mean, it's just her second project. And I think you're so right about the voice. You just listen to it. That's one of the first things I picked up on as well, is just how great that voice sounds. But you mentioned these lyrics. What were, I guess, a couple part or two that maybe where the lyrics just kind of stood out to you as maybe not supporting how great her voice sounded? Yeah,
there's a song called The Feels right up front, which just seems kind of like that weird meme of, hello, fellow teenagers a little bit, and I don't know why. I mean, obviously, Maren Morris is a young woman. She should be speaking in the slang of the day, I guess, but something about it just felt kind of hollow. And for a singer with such emotional range to describe your, emotional expression as the feels, just really bummed me out. And it's hard to say exactly what makes the disconnection between a lyric and a vocal performance not work. I didn't quote many of the lyrics in the piece directly because when you see words on paper, it's not the full story. Obviously, lyrics are to be sung, and that connection point between the melody and the words themselves, there's all kinds of mysterious meaning in there. So I printed up a lot of the lyrics, and I was like, well, these don't seem so bad. What's the problem here? Maybe I think she's singing with such emotional power and magnetism that, again, the words just kind of felt beneath the level of the vocal delivery. Clearly Maren Morris is someone who listens to a wide variety of music. There's an incredible R&B influence in her vocal delivery. There's, I think, she probably listens to hip-hop based on the sort of cadences in her vocal phrasing. Obviously, her producers and her are keyed into what popular music sounds like. There's tons of synthesizers, electronic drums, things that are sort of poo-pooed in Nashville proper. But clearly, Maren Morris has big ears, and she's listening widely. I think she still operates from a country tradition centrally, but she's not afraid to sort of bend the aesthetic to incorporate things that work for her. So of course, if you were to tell me that a country singer like that has written a song about all the different kinds of music that influence her and that have been there for her, for me, the expectation is to learn something more than the fact that she likes Coldplay.
Mm-hmm. And I think and definitely, I think right there you're mentioning like hip hop and R&B. I think you can definitely hear that throughout the album, and it makes me wonder if this is her. This is a really big album for her. Coming after that song, "The Middle" with Zedd, which was a mega hit.
Yeah.
Is she starting to move away from the genre of country entirely? Is she starting to try to rebrand herself as a pop artist if she's, starting to shout out other artists from other genres and maybe not doing a full-on country sound?
I think she certainly has a lot more attention from people outside of the country music listenership bubble, if you will. People outside of country radio devotees are aware of who she is now. But, it all depends how you think about genre. I don't like to think of genres or styles as these sort of territories that artists cross back and forth, like there's some kind of demarcation line that separates, country, R&B, rock and roll, whatever. I think of them as traditions and like inheritances, if you will, and it's basically every artist can kind of choose what they want to inherit, what they want to funnel into their music from the past. So, when we talk about like, is Maren Morris a country artist or has she gone pop? To me, that conversation doesn't really mean so much. It's like, obviously she has influences of both of those things. It shouldn't be as hard, I think, to hear the country music influence as it is for some people, even though she doesn't really have kind of like a traditional twang to her voice. I find that like her syllables and her vowels kind of curve, in the direction of a twang, if you will, and you can hear it if you have to squint for it. You might have to squint to hear it, but it's still there. And I think it's far more interesting to talk about artists about like, what they're inheriting and what they're funneling into their music than, what lines they're crossing and what boundaries they're trying to break. Because, those things don't exist. They're imaginary. Genre is a construction that we've made for ourselves to be more comfortable with the idea that, music exists in different zones. Of course, genre is sort of a contract with capitalism, and there are radio formats still. There are sections of streaming service stores, if you will, different playlists that exist on streaming services that sort of divide people by genre. But I think when we hear Maren Morris, you're hearing a country singer who has a very fluent hyper awareness to pop music at large.
Mm-hmm. And I think you made some good points there about genres, and nowadays more than ever it's harder to pin down artists in one single genre. They constantly are crossing over. I noticed in your piece this song, A Song for Everything, you compared with her hit The Middle. Why did you compare those two tracks?
Well, because they kind of seem to be swinging for the fences in the same way. What is pop music, right? What is as a style? I mean, it's hard to say. I think what we might define it as is sort of like the maybe like the widest arms. You know what I mean? The idea of like the sort of biggest embrace of an audience that you can have with a song, if that makes any sense. The idea of trying to reach as many people as possible. And in The Middle certainly is a pop song in that sense. It was a Target commercial, you know what I mean? And it was probably the greatest Target commercial that will ever happen. I think it's an incredible song, so well sung, so expressive, so colorful, and just marvelously constructed. A Song for Everything kind of goes for the same vibe. I think it's trying to reach that same big audience, but the melodies itself felt more tepid. The performance didn't feel as enthusiastic to me, and again, the lyrics just don't stand up to the vocal performance. So whenever an artist goes for broke and is trying to reach as many eardrums as possible and they nail it, nothing is more exciting than that as a pop music fan, or as a music fan, to hear someone really absolutely going for it and totally achieving it. And that's what I think The Middle does. And then again, on the contrary, nothing is worse, I think, or more off-putting than seeing an artist kind of going for everything and really coming up short. And that's where this Maren Morris song, A Song for Everything, kind of lands for me personally.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it on the head. It's when you try to make a pop music hit or just a music hit in general, if it hits, that's great. If it doesn't, a lot of people are going to be shaking their heads at that track because you try to make it big. If it's usually kind of obvious when you're trying to make a song top the charts.
Sure. It seems almost unseemly for some reason, right? Like how dare you attempt such a grand idea, you know? But then when you hit the lottery and it works, then we all bow down and genuflect before that. So
exactly,
it's funny how that works.
It is a kind of funny way. So I guess now, just taking this project into consideration, where do you think Maren Morris stands as an artist? You mentioned how you loved her first project. This one, there were some flaws in the lyrics. Just overall, I think, where do you think this project lands Maren Morris?
I think, I don't know if it was. I don't like to pretend to get in the headspace of the artist and what their goals were. I think like the meaning of any kind of art sort of belongs to the audience, if you will. But if I was to hypothesize, I think maybe this album is an attempt to keep her feet in country music while still capitalizing on the runaway success of the middle and sort of getting a bigger audience, and bridging those worlds, or existing in both of those worlds, or the worlds that we've sort of defined for her, the difference between pop and country. But again, I just think her vocal talent is so massive that she's allowed to have a misstep, or maybe even a few missteps. I'm reticent to compare them because it's basically like, the two young women in country music who matter the most. But her and Casey Musgraves, I think, have a really interesting sort of parallel or unparalleled trajectories, if you will. The first Casey album, Same Trailer, Different Park, I thought was incredible. The best, one of the best albums released that year. And then her second record, Pageant Material, didn't quite do it for me. Didn't feel like it was as confident or as sure-footed as the first one. And then Casey comes back with this, third album, Golden Hour, and I think it's just phenomenal, her greatest thing. So do I hope that we're experiencing something similar with Maren Morris? Personally, yeah, I do. I loved her first record. The second one feels not quite right, but I have every confidence that her future is incredibly bright, and she can surely correct the course, at least in my mind. I mean, this album could very well become a huge success. I'm just, the critic who got rubbed the wrong way, I guess, in this sense.
Exactly. Well, at the end of the day, what do we really know,
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the meaning of art belongs to us listeners and as individuals, So all we can do is get up and say how we feel and share how we feel. And if people disagree, that's cool. Like, it's hopefully when people disagree with each other about music, I think it helps them ideally better understand their own position. I love reading criticism that I disagree with because it helps me figure out where I'm at, So I hope the same thing happens with my criticism when I write. When people send me these letters saying, "You're an idiot, you're totally wrong," it's like, okay, great. Well, you're entitled to think that, and I'm glad you do. I'm glad you read the piece, and I hope it helped you figure out, where you stand.
Exactly, gives you some different viewpoints. Well, Chris, Thank you so much for doing this today, even with the technical difficulties. I really appreciate it. And where can people find your stuff out at?
TheWashingtonPost.com. I have bylines a couple times every week usually. I'm also on Twitter. It's Chris with 2 underscores, Richards, because my name is a common one. But yeah, all the work goes there. All the work on WashingtonPost.com.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to have all the links and everything down in the description of this podcast. And it was awesome to talk with you.
Oh, man, what a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Again, a big thank you to Chris for coming onto the podcast. Had a lot of fun talking with him today. Remember to check his stuff out at The Washington Post, their website, also on Twitter. He mentioned all of that at the end of the interview. I will have links. There are links down in the description. I don't care what platform you're on. Go down there. You will find links to all of his stuff, and I highly recommend reading him. He's one of my favorite writers to read right now. I think he always offers some really cool takes on current things happening in pop music. That will wrap it up for this edition of the Jackson Neill Music Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I had a lot of fun recording this one with Chris. Remember to check this out on JacksonNeillPodcast.com. That's the hub for all of my podcasts, including Anything Goes with Jackson Neill, where I interview musicians and other people, as well as the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. So all of my podcasts, JacksonNeillPodcast.com. Links to that down in the description. Also, if you really enjoy my content, if you really enjoy my podcast, maybe you want to consider becoming a member, and you can do that on Patreon. There's different monthly membership tiers, access to bonus content, a lot of cool stuff. Check out that link in the description. The first bonus content and everything coming on April 1st, so you want to get subscribed ASAP. Also down in the description, I know a lot of stuff down there, are links to my social media profiles at JacksonNeil20 on Instagram and Twitter, so go follow me on there if you want to see some cool content and other things that I post. I like to think of him pretty interesting on social media, but, you know, I'm a little biased, I guess. So thank you so much for listening. I'll see you all next time.